Dames en heren, goedemiddag.
Hoi hoi, hello and welcome to the Meet Maastricht podcast. I'm Katrina and together with our resident local Lucy, we will be exploring some of the amazing stories that make Maastricht so special. So sit back, relax and join us as we learn about our favourite Dutch city. Hello everybody and welcome to episode 24 of the Meet Maastricht podcast. I'm Katrina, here with Lucy. It feels like it's been so long since we've sat down and had a chat. What are we talking about today, if everyone's forgotten from the last episode?
Of course, everyone's forgotten from the last episode. There's been a bit of a break. We've been away. We've been otherwise occupied, and now we're back for the fall circuit of events and places of interest in this city that will continue to surprise you. Anyway, with that, what I announced during our last podcast was that we would be discussing the Nieuwenhof, or the New Court.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a white building, a convent and chapel. And it's sort of nestled up against the second city wall.
Yes.
I suppose most of you have discovered that second wall by now, where you can walk up the stairs and then walk on the top of it and have beautiful views of the park and the Yeke, and find quiet spaces to sit and think and look at all the lovely greenery. And then you will have behind you will have the roofs of the Nieuwenhof convent.
Well, I don't think I've been up on the wall to look that way. I've probably looked the other way, but to look on, can you look into that building? Sort of, is there a space you can look in above, or is it mostly just roof?
It is mostly roofs, yeah, because most of the building is 2 stories high. So that means you have the gutter. So at the start of the roof, about at the height of the wall.
Ah, okay.
So where the segment of the convent building is alongside the wall, I think you can only see the windows that are on the roof, and they are pretty small. And okay. I know what the spaces inside look like. They are the former attics, and when the building was being used as the law school, that is where we spent our long nights studying. So I know the view from all of these windows looking out. Yeah.
And it's if people are sort of wondering sort of more where it is, it's right near another one we talked about, the Martinushof. It's just right opposite that. It's not far from the Natural History Museum. It's in that sort of little pocket of the city, if people are wondering.
Yes, and these days it no longer houses the law school, in case you are getting confused now. I'm talking about quite a few years ago, of course. Today, it's the building houses the University College of Maastricht.
Yes. Rewinding a bit, when was this building first built?
It goes back 700 years. So.
Oh, good.
No, not this particular building. This particular building is 15th century. But
they're not old at all then.
No, that's just ridiculous. Yeah, well, of course, in the Maastricht context, it is always centuries immediately. I mean, we will get into that, of course, when we start exploring more outside the city fortifications. The buildings will be younger, but generally the monumental stuff within the city walls is old.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the point. Of course, we talk about history here, so that's old stuff. Yeah, with of course always the exceptions confirming the rule, as in, for instance, the Staag, the the men's choir.
Yeah.
Which was more about this community of men singing than it was about the building, because that's no longer there, and the building that was there was fairly recent. So anyway, I'm still casting about here for a particular, a more specific date to give you. 15th century. Yeah, true. But the very first community, so the beginning of the group of people who required the building of the Nieuwenhof in the 15th century, that goes back to the 13th.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and that concerns the group of people that we have come across before. It is women. And women who shared the desire to lead a religious life without becoming nuns.
Okay.
In the constraints of the convents, with their their communal living and their strict regimen. And we've talked of these women before, the Beguines.
Yeah.
And how that is a type of religious sentiment and a choice for a religious life that was prevalent in the 13th and 14th century, in especially the Low Countries. It is not something that can be found all over Europe. It is very characteristic of the Low Countries. Okay. So what is today Belgium and today the Netherlands. There was a male variety as well, and these people would congregate, but live in their own house. And those houses would be small and simple, and they would be grouped together, and usually around a chapel. And there would be communal occupations and obligations, but that would be very, very far removed from what life in a convent was like.
Yeah. And
of course, this was one of the reasons why they irritated the church.
Too much independence.
Yes, that was just not desirable as far as the church hierarchy was concerned. But this is how the community of the Nieuwenhof started, and the Nieuwenhof is called the Nieuwenhof, the new court, because obviously there must have been an old court.
Yes.
And there was, and it was, and in the language of the time that was called the Aldenhof. Okay. If you've been looking at maps and street signs, you've come across it. Part of the park outside the walls is called the Aldenhof Park.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. The one with D'Artagnan, is that?
Yes,
is he
exactly.
Part of that park, yes.
Yeah. Light bulb moment, isn't that wonderful? Yes. So that's the connection. The old court, Aldenhof, is where this congregation of religious women lived together.
Okay.
Except it was a very unfortunate spot.
Oh.
Well, imagine it now. You know where it is localized now, and the Yeker is everywhere. So they would be washed out regularly. There'd be lots of trouble with the water, and also they weren't happy with the spot because it was, well, there were the city gates and there was all this traffic going in and out and lots of noise and commotion and too many people, and it's, so they were they didn't feel they could lead the kind of
peaceful life
yes
that they wanted.
So they petitioned the bishop and the parish of St. Peter, because of course right outside the walls Maastricht's jurisdiction ended and St. Peter's started. So they had to petition several lords and administrators if they could please move, and they were allowed to. So they moved, and then what happened was that new court outside the walls kept being destroyed. So in the 15th century, it sort of got bombed out about 3 times. So then they gave up. They gave up. Can we please come inside the walls?
Please.
Please. Please.
And so that's where the new one is.
Yeah.
Where it is now.
Yeah. So that is the second Nieuwenhof. and it is the third Hof. Because Aldenhof was the first outside the wall, and then the first Nieuwenhof was the second outside the wall, and then the third Nieuwenhof is inside the wall, and that's the building that's still there.
So is there a reason, I don't know, you might not know, that it's a Hof and not a Hofje? Because I know that some of the Beguines, when I was looking at them last time, often lived in, like you said, in the separate little sort of houses of a Hofje with a little chapel. Is there a reason that they chose a bigger, I guess, I don't know, what's the main difference?
Well, it Martinus Hofje was not a religious institution. The people who lived there they were laymen, all of them, all the time, all down the edges, and still. So that was, of course, it had a religious motive, but the people living there were not. They hadn't taken any oath of religious authority at all, and that is different for the court.
But so they chose to build, but because it's sort of all connected, it's not really just little houses.
No, but that is because, as I mentioned earlier, the male hierarchy of the church did not condone this partial autonomy of these congregations. So they demanded they would take on a religious rule.
Okay.
And the statute, so to speak, that would generally be used for both the male and the female Beguines would be the third order of the Franciscans.
Okay.
So the tertiary, as it is then called, the tertiary order of Saint Francis,
right,
is a monastic rule that is not awfully strict.
Okay.
But as of the moment that they were obliged to take on this rule, which is around 1500, they are also obliged to live in a convent and not in separate houses. Okay.
So is there a reason then that it doesn't have the name of the St. Franciscan monks, that they called it the New Court instead of the Franciscan New Court?
No, but there's this tertiary order of the Franciscans that's a statutory thing. So that applied to several communities in the city.
Yeah.
And it would apply to hundreds and hundreds of communities all over the place. So to distinguish them, they would still have their own name, and that would often be the locality, the place where they were, and that was the New Court. So
I know we've talked about like different groups of people serving different functions and teaching or nursing or working with the community. Did this group do anything like that?
No. Oh. No, they were contemplative. How do you pronounce that in English?
Yeah, contemplative.
Oh, I was wondering where the emphasis went.
That's how I would pronounce it. There's probably different ways.
We have met this sort of setup as well with the little convent of Saint Anthony. Mm-hmm. And it was, the point there was also to, turn inwards and to concentrate on the offices that had to be taken care of. So an observance in the chapel. I think it was about 10 times in a day, with 3 of them practically before sunrise most of the year. Yeah, so they were mostly praying, meditating, reading the scripture, maybe doing some housework, and maybe doing a little spinning and weaving for income. Yeah. But most of these convents also had extensive holdings. So most of their income could come from rent on the lands that they owned, and then rented out to be worked.
Yeah.
And quite often these small communities of women, what you have to imagine is something between 10 and 20 women in the course of the centuries living together. They would generally have boarders as well. So single women
Okay.
who were not bound by the religious oaths. They could live in places like these, and they would pay room and board.
Yeah.
So that.
I was going to say that seems like a very big space for 10 or 20 women, but if they had boarders and other people as well. Yeah,
and it differed over time, of course.
Yeah.
So it might have been really crowded at times, and it might have been pretty empty at times. And of course there would be servants as well. Mm-hmm. So they were you have to think of them as secluded, quiet communities in the city.
Yeah.
And there were people who really preferred that kind of life. And when you look at the type of options that were available to women at the time, I can imagine. I'm not really surprised.
No, the actual building itself, is it because it has the Hof name, does it have a central sort of courtyard?
Yes.
Is it built sort of in a square-ish shape?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. We have discussed before how the Dutch word Hof can signify all sorts of things.
Yes. Well, that's why I have to clarify, just in case.
Exactly. But in this case, the meaning of it has a central courtyard applies. Yes, it is built in a square and with the chapel added to one side of it. So yes, there is.
I think you can see where the chapel is. The chapel sort of on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Yes. So you can sort of, if you walk down the Zvingelput, which is the street that sort of the front part is on, you can see on the right-hand side there's the chapel, and then there's the big wooden doors out the front. Which I imagine if you're a student or someone who looks like a student, you can, maybe not at the moment. There's probably very strict rules. Don't try and get in at the moment, but I imagine there would be open days and all sorts of things where you could go and have a little explore. Yeah,
but I mean, in normal times, all these buildings are open to the public anyway. I mean, there's gates at the library where you can only access when you have a student pass. But as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, most of the faculty buildings would just be accessible.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I might have mentioned before, when we first moved to the Netherlands, we lived literally across the road from the Nieuwenhof. So I saw many people going in and out of those big doors. So hopefully in the future, if you're interested, you'll be able to go have a look.
Just don't do it now, because everybody is skittish. I was at a lecture at the former Lesser Friars Church, the second one, because we also had a series of those, which is now the administration building of the university. And of course that's a church too. But the first thing that happens when you walk through the door is there's a barrier there with a person behind it who says this is where you walk. Yeah. And okay, we will just have to deal with it. I mean, we have been so lucky to have not experienced an epidemic for about 3 generations, because and then that's just us in our part of the world. I mean,
I think we've also been very lucky to have access to all these buildings. I know on the podcast we often talk about buildings that we don't have access to, but a lot of the university buildings, when the university is functioning like a normal institution, we're lucky that we can just sort of go into a lot of these places, because they could have easily been snaffled up by private people, private companies, or so we are also very grateful that we can normally go in.
But not the state Maastricht was in when the university started the gobbling, because it would decay all over the place. The city was on a downhill skid, something horrible, and it has become as picturesque and as affluent as it is now, thanks in great part to the university.
Yeah. So in saying that, when did the Beguines and the women leave that building then?
Well, this is also a recurring element in the pattern that we're beginning to see in the city's history, the French Revolution.
Ah, okay.
So from 1502 to 1796, I mean, just have a look at that. That is, several centuries. There was this uneventful, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, sieges and
few bombs.
Bombs and murdering armies and epidemics and the usual stuff going on. But as far as all the rest is concerned, for those centuries, these ladies of the tertiary order from their little convents could just live there and peacefully die there and be buried, and and things just sort of sailed along, not necessarily merrily, but not much happening. So fine. And of course the French Revolutionary armies occupying the city, making a break with history in every possible way, was an enormous disruption.
And it's interesting because they were forced into the tertiary order and forced into the Hof because they weren't, strict enough. They weren't religious enough. And then the French Revolution comes and says, oh, well, now you're too religious and you can't possibly do that. And so it must have been, I mean, it wouldn't have been the same women because it was hundreds of years later. But it's interesting the way that history sort of molded and flowed through it, because it's such a turn from what happened.
But that is what history will do. I mean, the French Revolution simply stipulated that all the old had to be done away with, and that was primarily the nobility and the church. And what that means is that you're destroying a societal order, and in every possible way. So all the possessions were simply taken away. There must be a word for that. It's not annexed, confiscated. That's the word. Everything was simply confiscated and then put up for sale. Everything at the same time, which of course is the surest way to destroying the possibility of getting a reasonable price for whatever.
Yeah.
And this has been a recurring element in many of the stories here, that it was confiscated property, which became pretty much useless overnight, and the people inhabiting these places were rendered both homeless and destitute.
Yeah.
The new rulers would offer sort of vouchers that could be used to buy these properties. Imagine this: you would get a voucher to buy your own property, which you had just lost, and these vouchers were worth next to nothing.
Yeah.
And quite a few of the religious orders simply, and these sisters were among them, simply refused to accept them.
Right.
And also, what several of the orders in the city did was write a letter to the new authorities, vehemently protesting the fact that they were being robbed like this.
Yeah.
And only leaving the premises at the very, very last moment, when the new authorities were threatening them with physical violence.
Yeah. And you can imagine if there were also boarders or any servants. I mean, that wasn't, I feel like that, and it happens in all, big upheaval and revolutions, is that there's these contradictions of, what about those people who did absolutely nothing wrong and were just surviving on what they could survive with? The servants in the big houses, what happens to them if they might have lived there their whole life? Like, it's, so do we know what happened to the women after that?
Well, what first happened is that anything and everything of value, of course, they were allowed to take their personal possessions.
Yeah.
Yeah, whoop-de-da.
Yeah, I can't imagine they would have had many personal possessions.
Exactly, because this is one of the requirements of being a nun.
Yeah.
You have to take a vow of chastity, you have to take a vow of obedience, and you have to take a vow of poverty. So, so the people living in these communities would have no personal property. They might have a few things in their private cells. And of course, some convents would be obscenely rich. Of course, there have been periods and there have been places where that was the case.
Yes.
But okay, this particular convent was among many where that was not the case. People had very few personal possessions. The convent itself was not particularly rich. It was well off. I mean, they could manage on the income of their lands and all that. But there was not any decadence of any sort. And what did happen in the months leading up to the final threat of forcible eviction was, of course, the building was plundered. I mean, the people were leaving, finding new places to stay. Most of them stayed in the city. Yeah. And in the meantime, the building was ransacked. So everything of value, the wooden doors and windows and the stone fireplaces and marble tops in the kitchen and everything was gone. Right. So the building was just ransacked, and then the French authorities complained about that, and the nuns were going, well, we don't know who did this.
No, it's not. I doubt the nuns ran off with the marble countertops.
Well, the thing is, we don't know, but yes, it's unlikely. Yeah,
might some suspicious women in habits scurrying off with some wooden window frames.
Yeah, you can just see that. It is also pity and so sad also.
Yeah. But. And so did people move into the building?
Well, what was happening of course there was all sorts of stuff being confiscated all over the place. Yeah. And another confiscation that took place was that the fairly new house for the poor, the orphanage, just around the corner, had been confiscated by the French army. Oh. To serve as the military hospital.
Right. What about all the orphans?
Yes, exactly. Well, the city provided whatever they could rustle up at the moment, 2 private homes, and then they lost one, and then there were all these dozens of orphans and a few people unfit to live in general society were all crammed together in this one house, and the administrators, of course, were beating down the doors of the municipal authorities saying this is unacceptable, this is not, but come on, give us a decent space. And then they were given the Nieuwenhof. Okay. So that was a sort of ridiculous trade, but okay.
I guess it wouldn't be too badly suited to somewhere where people were living in separate rooms. It's it's better than giving them a theater or something.
Yeah, no, this is true. This is true, and for quite a long time, it did suffice as housing for the poor orphans. Yeah. Because please do realize this was an institution solely for the poor. It was also an institution where the admittance was only open to children that had lost one of their parents, not both of them. Oh. So this was more a poor people's house than an orphanage, but it housed mainly half orphans, so poor half orphans.
That's very specific.
Yeah, very, very. But there was also a Roman Catholic orphanage, and if your remaining parent died, that's where you were transferred to. Okay. And it was really only late in the 19th century that they were considering doing away with this distinction. But this is, of course, where by the time that ideas about the type of housing and the type of care had greatly developed from the early 19th century. It took a while. And the Nieuwenhof was very, very strictly segregated between boys and girls.
Yeah.
So there was a boys' department and a girls' department, and they were living under very different regimes.
Okay.
And of course, this also is a very far cry from how the care for these children ended up being in the 20th century, when of course psychology, how do you pronounce that? Pedagogy.
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 I think so. I'm never sure how to pronounce that word either.
Oh, good. The science of how to raise children. That's what it is, of course.
Yes.
And of course there were the insights of the 20th century were primarily that what you should be trying to do is recreate the home environment as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So the arrangements these days for orphans and not even half orphans, but for orphans would be to have communal housing approaching a family setting as much as possible. So these children are now completely invisible in private homes all around the city.
Yes.
I mean, we don't even know where they are, right? which is of course vastly preferable.
Yes.
To the boys in their costume and the girls in their costume,
Yeah.
all of them identical, being marched down the city streets en group.
Yeah.
Look, here come the orphans. The poor orphans, mind you.
Yeah, the poor half orphans. And so imagine eventually the university bought the building, but what happened in between? Did that take a while?
No, that took a long time before the university bought it. They rented it for a long time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was only in '88 that they bought it, and they'd been using it for quite some time before that. When the nuns and the orphans left, that was in 1980.
Okay.
So it has been used for children and their caretakers until 1980.
Yeah.
And of course they have been thinking about what to do with it. And it went really straight from the nuns to the university.
Okay.
So that there wasn't really a gap there. When the children and the nuns left, the builders came in and restored things and reorganized things, and then the law faculty started.
And then the law faculty moved eventually, and now it's the college.
Yes, the university college. Yes. Yeah. So it has the building hasn't been empty.
No. Yeah, compared with a lot of them that were sort of left to crumble a little bit, it's amazing that it's been in use for so long.
Yeah, no, not this one. It went from the children to the students.
That's quite nice.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, your favourite question is obviously, is there anything else about the Nieuwenhof, a little nugget that you'd like to share, Lucy?
No, I think it's quite enough. If you want to know more, work on your Dutch. This is so cruel. And have a look at Maastricht's Silhouette number 32. There's lots more about the building history of it and all the architectural elements, and more about the regimen that the children lived in the course of the centuries, because of course it's been a children's house for a long time. And of course here we also meet the religious orders we've been seeing before. You know, the brothers of the Beguines taking care of the boys, and the zusters onder de bogen taking care of the girls. And so it always ties in with those stories as well.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Okay.
What are we going to be talking about next time?
Well, about Maastricht Silhouette number 2.
Number 2.
Number 2, yeah. So this book is older. This little brochure is older than you are, Katrina, and it deals with the Vogelstruis. I like to mix things up, so we're going from a convent, orphanage, law school to a bar.
Is that the bird something?
Yes, the Vogelstruis is the ostrich.
Oh, okay.
It's a legendary cafe on the Vreethof.
Oh, exciting! I do think I recognize the name. We'll have to. I'm sure there'll be some good photos of that if it's a legendary cafe.
You'll do just fine. I have no. So the contemporary word for an ostrich is een struisvogel.
Ah.
So the other way around. But this cafe is called the Vogelstruis, and it has a namestone above the entrance door with an ostrich on it. So
So if you want to get a head start, you can have a very safe, socially distanced walk along the Vreethof and see if you can spot the ostrich. Thank you so much for joining us today, and don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook by searching Meet Maastricht and on Instagram at @meet_Maastricht. If you would like to learn more about us, you can also visit our website at meetmaastricht.eu, where you can buy tickets and subscribe to our monthly newsletter so you're always up to date. Thanks again, and tune in next time to learn more about our beautiful city.
Tot ziens.